Hey, good morning, Shoot Extraordinary Conference. I hope that you are doing well wherever you are in the world. My name, if you don't know me, is Michael Anthony. I am the Vice President of Sales and Marketing here at Lynn's Baby. And I can tell you this right now, we are so incredibly excited to be here with you for Shoot Extraordinary. This conference was something that we decided to put together to bring not only education, but inspiration to the world from around the world. And over the course of the next 3 days, you are going to meet some of the most incredible Lynn's Baby speakers and educators and photographers. You're going to have the opportunities for image critiques, for reviews, to ask questions, to be a part of the panel and the community. And honestly, this is something that we felt was necessary. In a time when the world needs a little bit of inspiration, it is our honor as the team here in Lynn's Baby to be able to bring you this over the course of the next few days. Please do us a favor, tag your friends, let them know that we're streaming live. Check us out on Instagram and all the social medias at Lynn's Baby USA. You're going to see incredible speakers talking about inspiration, Lynn's Baby gear, how to, and more. Today we're live, but this course will also be re-streaming over the course of the next couple days and forever be free, because we believe that education shouldn't cost money here at Lynn's Baby, and we want to help give you the tools to shoot extraordinary. So as we head into today's class, think about all the amazing opportunities you have to learn, grab a piece of paper and a pen, tell some friends, and we will see you inside of the classroom. Morning Shoot Extraordinary Conference. We are here with our speaker, Robert Pugh, who is going to take us through an amazing adventure with Omni. First, I'm going to give him an opportunity to introduce himself. Robert, my friend, how are you today?
I'm brilliant. Feeling good and very excited for getting this first convention on the go.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're super happy that you're here with us. Tell us a little bit about your background, Robert, for those of us who don't know.
Okay, well, I mean, normally it would probably take me an hour to explain my background, so I'm going to try and cram it into as fast as I can. So briefly, I'm an international wedding and portrait photographer. So the international, because I do travel all over the globe. My normal stomping ground is sort of Dominic and Cuba for weddings.
I am so excited to be here today. I get to talk about Lens Baby. It's my favorite thing. Well, it's one of my favorite things. I got a lot of things that are favorite. And today we're talking about the journey of Lens Baby. We're talking about some of the hidden things, the things that went into the origination of Lens Baby. You know, I brought the original Lens Baby, the idea for the flexible hose. I'll get into that. Hopefully that's not a spoiler. And from there, it became a collaboration. It became a collaboration with you, because that one innovation, I got feedback saying, hey, we want something new. And so, or something better, or something worse, or something different. And that was the biggest theme that was from the very beginning. People wanted something different than what they could do with their regular camera lenses, and Lens Baby gave it to you. And you're here, so you must have liked something about it, or you're curious about it, but welcome. I'm excited to talk to you about this, and so let's just dig right in. In 1998, I went to a workshop at Santa Fe Workshops, and it was a great workshop. I was documenting. I was a photojournalist, so I decided I was going to do this documentary project on this fly fishing school outside of Santa Fe, and I love fly fishing anyhow, so it was a good excuse to get out on a river. But one of the days, I rented or borrowed a tilt shift lens from the library there at Santa Fe Workshops. Amazing school, amazing project. I can't wait until they open back up for us to go down in real life. But one of the things they have there is a library, and they just let you use these tools. And I took this 45mm tilt shift lens, put it on my film camera, we were all shooting film then, and went out into the river, put it on a tripod, shot it at 1 second. Now, I know I stacked the deck against me to be frustrated, but I was super frustrated with this lens because it only tilted a little bit. I mean, it tilted a normal amount for a regular tilt shift lens, but it didn't have a real strong effect, and I could not find where my slice was. It had numbers and dials and like scales. Like, I don't want to look at a scale when I'm out in the field photographing. So for me, I came away with a huge amount of frustration from that. And that was my first kind of seed of what ended up being Lens Baby. I mean, there's lots of frustrations that went into this, and solving those frustrations was a big key to that. But combined that experience with sharing a studio with about a dozen photographers, 2 of which were doing things that me as a photojournalist, I'd never even considered. One, Krista was shooting with a Diana camera, and I didn't know what that was. I didn't have an art background. I was a photojournalist, and I was going to make pictures that were corner to corner sharp, and I was going to try and be as invisible to the viewer as possible, where they looked at that and said, how did someone take this picture? I feel like I'm actually there. So that was my goal. And So I'm sharing the studio with a dozen photographers. Krista's shooting with a Diana camera, and Frank is shooting with a 55mm macro lens, and he screwed on this video converter to the front. And okay, the images that both of them were making were unbelievable. Krista's in particular, in a show, like she printed a bunch of 16x20s and hung them on the wall of the studio, and I just walked up to these images where technically all of the things that I strived for as a photographer, she had not done none of them. I mean, composition was great, but everything else, like, I didn't even know what this was. It was cross-processed, had no idea what that was, which was, you know, I'm not even going to explain it. But it was crazy. The colors were all whacked, the focus was off, and for me, looking at those images, they inspired me to say, hey, what's going on here? What am I trying to convey? And am I missing out on something? Are my perfect lenses taking out some of the energy and the emotion that I can see in Krista's? And then in Frank's, he was shooting this fisheye converter on the front of his macro lens, and he was shooting portraits with it where he was getting, you know, an inch, 2 inches away from them, and they were crazy. They weren't the most flattering things, but they were more flattering than I would think for a fisheye lens. It was weird. It was crazy. But for me, that ended up planting a seed of saying, okay, what could I do? I was a working professional. I was shooting film. I wasn't really looking to experiment a whole lot, but a couple years later, when I broke everything that I stood for in terms of being a purist, and I had just, I think 2 days before, maybe a week before, at a wedding, somebody had come up to me with their little point and shoot digital camera, and this was in 2000, and said, are you going to go digital? And I'm like, nah, that doesn't really apply to me. I'm going to, you know, I'll shoot film for the rest of my career. A week later, I put a Canon D30 on hold or on order at Pro Photo Supply here in Portland, and that was totally counter to what I had been thinking. But you know, technology changed, and it wasn't just a wallet-sized photo that you could make with these as in terms of prints. It was a 5x7, and not too many of my clients ordered bigger than 5x7. So off I went into digital. I get this camera on a Thursday, I think, and on a Friday I flew to New York City. I went with one camera and one lens. I went with a 28mm f1.8 Canon lens. Loved that lens on my film cameras. I got to New York City. It was the most frustrating thing of my life that it was a 1.6 crop and I now had a 45mm. I couldn't photograph the way I saw because 28 millimeter was a really important focal length for me, and it was the only lens I brought. So I pulled back on that experience and that respect for what Frank had done with his amazing portraits and that curiosity. And now when I took a picture, it wasn't $1 every picture. And I went into the camera stores around Times Square and found one of these similar lenses to him, to the one Frank had. He had one of a kind. I've never seen it. I've gone looking for it for years. And this is a 0.42x converter. I got a black one. I couldn't find it. So this is essentially the same thing. And I screwed it on the front of that 28 millimeter lens. And it was just like, you know, it was $90. I was in New York. I wanted to shoot wide and I couldn't. And Frank had done this thing. So he had planted this seed. I had wanted some special effects, but hadn't really taken risks in the past. I put this on my 28 millimeter lens and stopped it down to f11, and I got pretty good shots. It was like a 16 millimeter equivalent fisheye. It had lots of bending lines, and when I stopped it down to f11 or f16, maybe even f22, it was pretty sharp corner to corner. The center was always sharp. And so I said, well, I'll play with this for a little bit. You know what happened is I took this crazy lens, and at one point I tested it wide open, and I always do that. Maybe I learned it from this, that I tested it wide open even though I liked it stopped down, sort of. It was kind of a good lens, or kind of a not terrible lens. And I did test it wide open, and I said, well, that's pretty cool. The edges were out of focus. The lines, of course, were still bendy, and the center was sharp. So let me show you a few pictures here. So what I found with this was it allowed me to bring emotion and energy into my photos in the similar way to the way Krista had with that Diana camera. And that energy and that emotion wasn't necessarily present when I shot with a normal lens. And so it opened my eyes to say, hey, I can have a style that's not just about capturing the moment. It's not just about being a fly on the wall. It's not just about being invisible. And looking through a different lens gave me that. And two, I can photograph completely different subject matter or the same subject matter and get a completely different mood, get a mood that matches the scene. And so being able to take this image here at the bowling alley where I'm dragging the shutter, which would be something that I do in a situation like this with a normal lens as well. I'm doing some fill flash, and then you've got the craziness of the bent lines. You don't see much in terms of the edge, so this was probably stopped down to f8 or f11 or darker, I don't know. But at any rate, this gave me a different tool in my toolbox to give a presentation of what I had seen to my viewer that wasn't necessarily accessible. When I was a kid, I was curious. And in more ways than one. And one of the things I did was I'd take everything apart. I took my bike apart. I turned the handlebars upside down so that now I had to take the seat off for the front wheel and the back wheel to touch the ground. And doing that, I had to now sit on the handlebars and the back wheel would steer. So I was moving my body and sitting on the handlebars. I share this because there's some odd things about Lens Baby, and they come from somewhat of an odd place. And one of those things was that tinkering and that always curious, what's possible, and being able to turn my bike upside down, or half of it upside down, or 2/3, 80%, and have the handlebars right side up, but have to sit on the handlebars. That was a challenge for me. I wanted something that challenged me to say, oh, is this possible? And I fell That first day I probably fell 40 times. I ended up in the hospital because one of those falls, or multiple falls, had torn my esophagus internally. The doctor said they'd never seen anything like it. But I was really proud. Like I lived, but I was really proud of what I had learned. I'd learned a new skill that probably no one I knew had, and that was worth it. So, you know, I don't know if my parents agreed, but I did all sorts of stuff like that, just hacking. And this is just kind of a minor hack. Like I just screwed this on the filter threads. It wasn't a big deal. I didn't have to take anything apart. But it was the beginning of my photo hacking. Over the course of the next couple years, I photographed far too much with this lens, and I tend to do that when I find something new. I tend to obsess about it, and that was my first obsession in photography that wasn't just a strictly normal lens or a normal camera or a different type of film or a different who knows what, but the things that were acceptable, the things you'd see in popular photography or Shutterbug, those are the things that I'd obsessed about up until that point. And over the course of the next 2 years, tons of photos. I took a workshop from Kevin Kubota. I was frustrated with my workflow. It's taken me 5 times as long to edit a wedding now that I was shooting half digital and half film, and I didn't know how to make those digital images look like real pictures. And so I took this workshop from Kevin Kubota, changed my life. But as the course of that, it was his very first digital boot camp, but in the course of that he saw some of these images that I'd taken with this lens, and he called me up and said, for the third workshop, he said, Craig, I want you to come teach this stuff that you're doing with these crazy lenses. And I'm like, I'm thinking, I got one lens, New York City. I had gone out and I had tried to find a better one. Nothing. I'd found this ended up, or the black version of this that I screwed on my lens, ended up being the very best that I ever found. I probably bought 40 of them. So what am I going to teach? And so for me, I've always been a daydreaming. I've always been looking at, you know, what can distract me and how can I get excited about that. And one day I'm in my studio, I'm supposed to be editing a wedding, and I'm looking around here, I'm looking around there, and I see my speed graphic camera sitting on a shelf. And I'd had an idea that I approached an engineer about, just to make stuff for me, not necessarily a product, but to be able to use my medium format lenses on the front of my Canon EOS cameras, and there just wasn't enough room. There was, you know, maybe 1/8 of an inch, and that wasn't enough to tilt, and free lensing wasn't a thing, or I'm sure I would have gotten into it. And I looked and I saw my speed graphic camera, and it had a 101 millimeter lens, and it had all of this distance between the lens and the image plane, and I thought, well, that's more than 1/8 of an inch, and I need something to what do I need to do to make that be something I can mount on my camera and make it work? And so I thought, well, I could use a bellows, but bellows are really flexible, and that's not, and I didn't have any bellows. I probably would have just used a bellows, but they're super flexible, so it's not going to really hold it up, and I'll be jittery and whatnot. So what I really need is I need something that I can squeeze against to focus, and it's just going to lock the light. You know, whether that's just pressing up against the mount, I didn't know, but I just wanted a resilient bellows. So I started searching for resilient bellows, and of course there's nothing about resilient bellows. That's my word. And a few days later, I drove past a local hardware store and am just walking through going resilient bellows, you know, and just no idea. And I come across a shop vac, and I'll tell you, nobody has been more excited in the history of shop vacs to come across a shop vac. Here's a shop vac, and I look at the hose and I'm like, that's it. It bends, it holds its shape, I can squeeze against it. You know, it ended up being quite stiff, and this is the shop vac hose that I bought that day. I cut off the end and then cut off a section. It ended up being the exact length that I needed to get close focus, and then when I squeeze it, I can get out toward infinity. And I took it to a wedding that weekend, maybe the next day, maybe a couple days later, And let me just show you an image here. This is one of the very first images from that very first morning up at Mount Hood, Timberline. The groom is sitting on the ski lift with his groomsmen on the morning of the wedding, and I'm tilting that lens, and you can see that slice of focus going off toward infinity. Way more effect than I could get from that 45 millimeter lens, even if I figured it out. I did rent it a couple more times. It just continued to frustrate me, and this was what I was after, and I could not believe what I was seeing when I looked at the back of the camera. I look back at me as a kid and remember the curiosity that I approached life with. And it was not the same curiosity that the other kids approached life with. My friends would be playing basketball. I'd be staring at the rim, looking at the net, saying, how does that, who thought of this way, this curlicue way to make the wires that would hold the net on? I was way more interested in that than getting good at my free throws or anything in basketball. And that curiosity has followed me, and that's what really led to the putting things together and the analysis of that rim as a kid, and 100,000 other things gave me the analytical kind of, I don't know, it's not really chops, but it is a background in just looking at things and saying, okay, how can that be different? How can these things go together? And how does that fit with this? So that curious kid on multiple levels it is a part of this project, and it's a fun exploration that kid gets to go through right here as I'm talking and learning and remembering these things. Well, the next step in the process was, okay, what else can I do? What other lenses? Similar to that 0.42x lens that I got in New York, and thinking, okay, there's got to be a better one. I started saying, well, there's got to be different lenses that do different things, and this is one of them. I went out, I got 120 folding cameras, I got this is a lens from a friend of my dad's who was an optical engineer at Tektronix. My dad was a mechanical engineer, and so Bob White would let me come over and he'd hand me lenses and say, can you use this, can you use that, and I would test the focal length just by holding it up to my SLR or holding it up to a piece of paper, and this was one of them. It's actually half of a CRT lens, and this one was very different because that speed graphic lens, when it was pointed straight ahead, it was just a 101 millimeter lens, normal, I mean, if I could hold it straight. And this one had this beautiful painterly effect on everything. Like, it really didn't have much of a sweet spot. It was somewhat of a sweet spot, but let me just show you some pictures. So this is one of the images I shot. I shot this at the end of a wedding down on the Oregon coast, and you can see there's kind of a sweet spot over in the lower right, but that painterly treatment of the colors and the hues, and it was just unbelievable, and made for some wonderful black and white images when I bumped the contrast up. It gave me a mood. It gave me a way of looking at a scene and feeling a mood in what I saw, and to be able to convey that to my viewers gave me something I'd never had before. And so here it was. I had this precision lens that I could tilt and get this slice of focus, and then the next thing I did was find this really non-precision thing that really wasn't that sharp. It was only half a lens. It was turned upside down, I think. I don't know. I don't know how it was intended to be made because I don't have the other half. But regardless, this was something exciting, and you can see here in this third image the playfulness, the sense of just emotion and connection that lens was able to create on the front of my DSLR was super exciting and super unique for me. I was able to give my clients images that were just so different than the other photographers had in the local community, and anywhere actually, the whole world. I had a unique lens nobody else had. I had something that could be done, and that's really the way, that ability to do something that nobody else can. I thought that's my edge. That's where I'm headed as a photographer. I'll always be able to stay ahead of what's going on, and have that unique style. But it wasn't much of my images that were coming from these particular lenses. It was maybe 5%. This particular wedding, the clients were just so up for anything. I think maybe it was 7%. But regardless, I shot as a photojournalist most of the time, and then would come in and more of a National Geographic look to my images, or that was my hope. And then I would pull those lenses out when I'd gotten all of those safe images and I wanted to play. And those were the images, more often than not, that my clients really connected with. If I look back to childhood and think about a parallel to this exploration and finding these crazy half lenses that I can shoot with, I remember having a tire swing in my backyard, and I would spin it, probably 1,000 times and get it, to shorten up. It was like a 20-foot rope up into this huge maple tree, and I would spin it and 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 spin it until I couldn't hold it from going back the other direction anymore. And the reason I did was I wanted to jump on that tire swing, and I wanted to spin as fast as I could and then go out and have it slow down. And I was so curious, like, how does that work? Why when I'm out and my legs are out and my head is out and my arms are holding onto the swing or the rope, does everything slow down? And why when I come in does everything go so fast? It's crazy. What was great about that experience and that obsession with how this worked or why it worked, it was fun. And that's what I found here. Even though there was this technical aspect of, okay, what's the focal length? Can we get it to focus? Can we find a piece of tubing that's the right length? And drilling or machining a hole in a body cap that we can snap the tubing into. That's all like left brain stuff. But then I got to go out on the beach and play and explore what was possible, what this could create. And that's the spinning and the tire swing for me. I look back on that and I'm like, oh yeah, I was curious, but really I just had a fun experience. I got to spin and spin and spin and spin and spin and spin and spin. It was awesome. And that 20-30 foot rope, man, I could get a lot of turns in that. So the next step after I've got two of these things is to figure out, okay, what do I do with these that can be interesting, that I can go back to Kevin Kubota. He asked me to teach at a workshop. I didn't have anything to teach. I came up with the Lens Baby with that speed graphic lens. Now I've got another lens. I've got two lenses. I still can't tell people, go do this or go make this in this certain way. So I didn't know what I had. So my goal was to get at least 10 for the 25 people, 10 of these prototypes that I could put together that people would be able to go out and experiment with and tell me, what do I like? What do I not like? And so it quickly went, because really the motivation for this project was largely because I had to have something to teach. So it wasn't so much about having a unique one-of-a-kind lens all of a sudden. It was more about, okay, how can I teach? How can I help Kevin with this project? How can I spread the enthusiasm for photography, for creativity, for exploration? Had no idea if this was going to resonate, but off I went. So I went with a bunch of lenses. Some of them were really primitive, like Holga lenses that had been taken off by holgamods.com, and they put other lenses on there, or pinholes on, and so I took those and I brought them and put them on shop vac hose, and I had the really good lenses. I got 120 folding cameras that I took the lenses off, put them on a piece of shop vac hose, all sorts of stuff. And what I saw was people really resonated with the simple the simple lenses. And so when I'd give them something like the Speed Graphic, a lot of these photographers already had experience with bellows cameras or view cameras and tilt shift lenses, or they own tilt shift lenses, and they would come back and say, well, I can do that with my tilt shift lens. What else do you got? And it got more and more and more simple, to where I actually went out and just got the cheapest. It was almost like a dare, like, okay, how do we make this, dumb this down as far as we can? And I went out and got eye loops off of eBay from India for, you know, $20 for a dozen of them, and they'd be all different focal lengths, but it was just a magnifying glass essentially, and a bad magnifying glass at that. But I'd put an f5.6 size. What is this? It's a aperture, but like a little piece of plastic that I'd glue in the back, and that would stop it down, and it would give a nice, decent sized sweet spot. And I sent that out with people, and oh my gosh, the people that didn't like the Speed Graphic lens, which of course you couldn't source those, and if you made it from scratch, we'd be talking, you know, hundreds of dollars, maybe thousands. And to be able to give them a magnifying glass and have them come back and say, this is what I'm after. I can't do this with my regular camera lens. This image here is from Red Square in Russia, and I was able to take this right after. It's actually the very lens I'm holding. I was able to take this image like the week after I built this, and this is when I decided, okay, this is what the lens is going to be. These are the specs for the lens baby that I'm coming out with. Because I had come back from one of those workshops with Kevin, and my soon-to-be business partner, Sam Pardue, who was doing marketing for my photography business, had asked me about Lens Baby. I brought it up. He'd say, well, what is it? I showed it to him. He didn't take that too seriously because, you know, it didn't look like much. But he said, do you have anybody to call? So he called the photographers and that had been using the lens, got a hold of 7 or 8 of them. All of them had the same feedback. I can't do this with anything else I have. I feel like it's reignited my enthusiasm and my joy for photography. And that's all he had to hear. He said, I'm in. And he came in and he paid for the website, he paid for the patent, and I said, okay, I'm going to come out with a product that we can sell. And so this was that product in my mind. It had a water jet cut piece of plastic snapped on the front so that you could squeeze and focus it without getting your fingers in the front. It had these eye loops from India, and I'd get a dozen of them or 20 of them, I don't even know. And of those, only 20-30% of them were the right focal length. Maybe I would be lucky and get 50% out of one batch. And then they have scratches, so some of them I couldn't put into a lens that we could ever sell. And so, like, this was not a repeatable model. I had a friend of mine, Bob, who was cutting holes in the body caps, but I decided after this trip to Russia that we're going to sell this. This is going to be the end product. So we sold, I don't know, a couple dozen of them that fall. This is fall of 2003. And I got an email from one of our customers. It was all sold online. And he said, I took the lens out of the box when I got it. I looked at it. I didn't put it on my camera. I put it back in the box. I'm going to send it back to you. I want my money back. And I thought, well, of course you want your money back. You didn't take pictures with it. And so for me, having that experience of taking the pictures and knowing that that's really where this is, to be on Red Square and to be able to make images that are something that nobody has ever made of Red Square before. That's the joy, and that's the enthusiasm that I had for it. But I realized we don't have a product. But before I do that, I want to talk about this randomness that I experienced. And I remember as a child, I would stare at the ceiling. We had these plaster ceilings in our house that had this totally random pattern. It was very porous, like it felt like sandpaper, because the walls were that way too. And it's really a curious finish. I've never seen that in any house before. But I would lay in bed in the shadows when the light would come from the side, and I would look for some sort of pattern. Like, what is this that I'm seeing? What is it? What does it mean? I'd see faces in there, and I think going from total randomness of, you know, anything's possible, and bringing that into a place of let's put some order to this. Let's look for some repeating patterns. Let's look for the eyeballs or the fangs of the monster that I would look at, and that kind of wanting to make sense of things. You know, it might be a stretch, but I think this and the images that it created came from that little kid, that little Craig Strong, that was looking at things that didn't make sense and saying, I want to make sense of this. From there, we went to, we had probably about 6 weeks at that point to get from a lens that somebody is not even willing to put on their camera to a lens that we're going to introduce at a trade show in Las Vegas in 6 weeks. And it took me about a week of dead ends of going to machine shops. I had no idea what I was doing. I was a photographer. I was not a manufacturer. I was not a designer. I didn't even know how to have a conversation about design. I just would go and go to Home Depot and get some shop vac hose, and I'd go down to the plastic shop. That's the closest I could get to talking with a supplier and say, I need something that's, you know, this round by this round, and they'd have to do the measurements for me. And so I had no idea what I was doing, and it was tons of learning. And one of the things I learned was there are people out there ready to help. And what I got eventually, I got to 2 suppliers. The first supplier was in Oregon City, and it was ProTurn, a precision machine shop. And I came in, I think all I wanted was a front lens cap. And I thought, oh, it'd be cool to make that in metal. That would make somebody actually put it on their camera. I don't know why I was thinking that. But the approaching Steve, who was the owner of a machine shop that wasn't very busy at that moment, and he was motivated. He wanted a new client, and so he actually took my idea and he said, "Well, okay, yeah, I can figure out a lens cap, but what if it screwed on to something that was metal that I also made?" I'm like, "Oh, that'd be cool." You know, and all of a sudden my thinking started to get a little bit bigger, and then I said, well, can you machine hundreds of body caps so that they've got a hole in them that I can snap the tubing into? And he said, yeah, but I could make that out of metal too. And I'm like, you know, my mind is blown at this point, because I'm like, wow, that's a real lens. And Steve actually took this project, and in 5 weeks from the time I sat down with him, he had designed, anodized, laser marked, and had delivered to me in time for the show all of the parts for our first order. And the enthusiasm that I had for this project went through the roof at this point. And I knew that once I had those machined parts, even before they were anodized, when he sent me test parts, that this is going to be something special. And because it was a real lens, people would put it on their $4,000, $8,000 DSLR. They were expensive back then. And it wouldn't be a misnomer to say, oh, this is something you got out of a Cracker Jacks box. You know, it was a big Cracker Jacks box, but I don't want to put that on my camera. And that's basically where that prototype that we sold a couple dozen of on the website was. And from there, the other supplier I found came out of a problem I had. We had an f5.6 aperture, largely because I wanted to drop the aperture into the metal cup and then, or it was a plastic cup with the original lens baby, and then put the glass on top of it, and then put a retaining ring so that if it falls apart, it falls out. Nothing ever goes into a camera if a lens baby falls apart. And so, because we didn't want to ruin people's cameras, if the lens gets broken or falls apart, then we just replace it, no big deal. So so that was my reasoning, but that also meant it did not have interchangeable apertures. During this time, I was not sleeping very much. It was, my mind was just constantly going because, like I said, I was a photographer. I had no idea what I was doing in terms of making a product, but that's what I was doing. Sam and I were on this journey together, and my job was to make a product that he could sell. And in the middle of the night, 3:30 in the morning, I wake up and I'm like, what if we stop it down from the front? And I went online, I'm like, looking for old lenses and seeing where the apertures were. I didn't find anything. I had no idea whether this would work or not, but it's 3:30 in the morning, it's dark. So I had to wait until the morning, and this is an image here of my daughter once the sun came up, or it was Portland, so the sun made things brighter, and she came out and she was my test subject. And sure enough, not only did the f5.6 aperture that I was going to put from behind that I taped in on the front, not only did it work, but it looked a little bit better, and it was a little sharper image, and the sweet spot had a little better fall off to the rest of the image. And so I took that image, and then I took the aperture out altogether and just put a little tape around the edge of the lens, and it was an f2.5 lens at that point, and I took this image of my son Will, and I said, oh, this is it. Because now we have a variable effect. We're not just stuck dark. None of our cameras at that point had variable or had a EVF or the ability to see your image digitally. So you were looking through an f5.6 lens and trying to squeeze to focus, which was already a pain, and it just wasn't going to work. So, it was going to work, and all my beta testers loved it, but this was one more option, and I'm all about options, and this was something at 3:30 in the morning came upon me. By the next morning, I was like, yes, we're doing this. And I now am 11 days away from WPPI, and we had to figure out, okay, what's going to happen between now and then that I can actually figure out how to do this. The key to that was we already had the apertures being made, the metal apertures being made here in Portland, and I was able to just go to him and say, okay, we want a whole bunch more because we had f2.8 to f8, but we want them made out of plastic. And that same manufacturer just shifted and made them out of plastic, and we were able to do that. But then how do you keep them in? And so I had to brainstorm this, ended up with a square, big fat square O-ring, and the apertures would fall out when sometimes on accident, but the O-ring, once you put it in properly, it was nice and secure, and so that was our solution. So 11 days later, we end up at the trade show, and off we go. The beauty of this entire situation or the journey for me was that we went from an idea that Sam said and the people that he interviewed said, this is something I want, to something that when we got to that trade show, it was crazy. We got mobbed. By the third day, we sold out the first 2 days. By the third, I was building them in our room at night, and by the third day, we sold out in probably a half an hour. There was a line at the booth before we even got to it, and I just went up for the rest of the day and was building lenses, and all of our beta testers from Kevin's workshops that were at the trade show, they were running them back and forth. They were coming up to the room and getting my built lenses and bringing them down to people who'd already paid for them or were waiting there at the booth. So it was a really exciting time, and yet another one of those moments that I'm like, oh, hey, this is actually going to be something great. And this is an image that we took on the trade show floor of Sam and B. Dyer and myself. Peggy Dyer was one of the early beta testers, and she brought her mom along. She didn't have anything to do. She spent the entire time in our booth, and we loved her. Couldn't have done it without her. So many stories like that came from these early days of LensBaby. So we've got a lens now that has an internal aperture. I mean, not really, but it's inside the lens, but it's interchangeable. And as hard as it was to get in and get out, it did broaden the perspective of what people could do with that lens. And that all came out of the criticism that I received from that customer who said, your lens is not worth 70 bucks. And if it is, I don't want to use it anyhow. And he hadn't even put it on his camera. So this little crackerjack thing was worthy of criticism. And so that self-criticism that I was so defended against, or from other people getting that criticism, was largely because I was so self-critical myself and so, introspective. But I look at all of those experiences as building to this experience where I was able to get feedback from somebody that was not positive, and yet be able to incorporate that in a way that actually served as a wonderful foundation for where LensBaby went next. And from there, over the course of the next year, we actually, within 2 weeks of that trade show, sold out of all of our inventory, and we expected that our inventory would last a year. And Sam went full-time. I had 2 years worth of weddings still booked, so it was a pretty crazy time business-wise for a photographer who's now playing an engineer on TV. I hadn't even gotten to that point, but I was in a role that I was totally unfamiliar with. And eventually that went into the LensBaby 2.0, same form factor, but it had magnetic apertures and a sharper, brighter lens. And then we took that sharper, brighter lens and aperture system into the 3G. This is a prototype. It's one of the early ones. We have an engineer who loves to see clear parts, so he can see exactly what's going on. So I'm glad that Bill loved that, and that we ended up with a mostly clear prototype here. But that was a whole other thing. Like there was so much going on. But let me show you some images with the new aperture system and from the 2.0 and the 3G, which were the same, to be able to capture these portraits of my kids. This is probably at f2.8 or f4 on the 2.0, and then just be able to capture something really, really unique. And my kids, if you look back over the course of all of the photos of them, you'll say, oh, Craig was shooting or developing this lens and then this lens, and sorry kids about the fisheye period as far as flattering photos. But to be able to get these images of my kids and give a completely different effect is really, really what I was looking for, and to be able to get that emotion from the images that of my kids' childhood that I would have missed with a sterile, straight lens. It's cool. I like looking back on that. I hope someday they will as well. So the 3G, if I look at this, I'm reminded of when I was a kid. I lived in the woods, and I would make live traps to see if I could outsmart the animals in the woods. And didn't hurt any of the animals, but it was this kind of like, how do I put this together with that in such a way that I can change and outsmart? Or there were all of these things that for me they didn't matter to anybody else, but they mattered to me, and they gave me that opportunity to say, okay, this is what I care about, this is what I want to do, this is what I'm going to do. But this, I tell you about the traps because there is a real sense of that, you know, we're moving, we're looking at mechanical options to be able to take this and lock it in place and then unlock it. It was really drawing on that problem solving that I had when I was a kid. From there, we went to the optic swap system. And the optic swap system was the Composer. This is the Composer Pro 2, but the Composer, and it had interchangeable optics to where instead of just having a single lens that was different, like we were selling before, different than any other lens on the market, we were now selling something that not only was it a different effect and a different type of focus, especially on the Muse, which was flexible bodied like the previous 3 versions, but it also gave you the ability to swap out your optics. So this came out in 2008, at the end of 2008, October, I believe, and it really broadened the number of options that we could give people, because you can see here I was even able to make a pinhole in a zone plate lens that we were able to put in to give people a completely different effect. And that's really what Lens Baby is all about, is moving into a space where you can get anything that you want that's possible out of our system. With the optic swap system, we have the edge optics, and when those are pointed straight ahead, they are extremely sharp corner to corner, and then when you tilt them, you get your effect. So that gives you a lot of variety here, and really this is the lens that I was after when I was at Santa Fe, was something that I could just tilt in one direction and had a long focus range, got me a really thin slice if that's what I wanted, because it tilts twice as much as a normal tilt shift lens. And this opened up this optic swap system with different optics, where we can get something super organic and artsy like the pinhole and zone plate, which switches back and forth between pinhole and zone plate options, or the other 5 optics that we had at the time. We've come out with 15 since, and this reminds me of me as a kid taking everything apart. I mean, to a fault. I would take everything apart, and once in a while they'd go back together, giving our users the ability to do that without breaking it, because I broke most things as a kid, is really close to my heart. So I think this came out of who I was as a kid and as a person, and you can see that all those options and that ability to modify what you've got gives you more options, and that's what I'm all about, you know. And it drives my business partners and our team crazy, because I'm always like, no, we got to add this and we got to add that and we got to add that. And these days I listen to them when they say, nah, that's not going to work, or that's too expensive, because I've got a little more business sense than I used to. But the journey that I've gone on has been really influenced by that little Craig who was seeing something and saying, how does that work? From there, we went to the Velvet system, and the Velvet lenses are macro focusing. They're a real lens, because in 2008 when we came out with this, we took an already odd system, and as far as the actual lenses, the creative effects lenses, and we made it more complex. And a lot of people looked at that and they just kind of glazed over, and they're like, oh wow, you can swap the optic? I have no idea what that even means. And then they walked away, and maybe you did that, but you came back, a lot of people came back to Lens Baby after a lot of exposures and their crazy friend off, you know, shooting these amazing images with with it. They came back when we started making the standalone lenses. This is our first standalone lens, was the Velvet 56. Did not have any kind of optic swap system. It worked like a regular manual focus lens, and this was a bit of a miracle, because when we came out with this, we really needed to come out with a product that people wanted, and our timeline was very short. Our suppliers really rose to the challenge, and our optical engineer made a lens unlike any other lens, because usually these are the lenses with glow or soft focus, and soft focus lenses tend to have very little detail when they've got a lot of glow in the image, and certainly not outside of the center. And with this lens, there's a very sharp underlying detail even at the brightest apertures. And let me show you a couple images here. I was able to take these out and shoot Neowise with the Velvet series, and this was the first night I went out, and I had all my Nikkor lenses with me and expected that that's what I'd be using. But the moment I saw this, I said, nope, I'm not using any of those lenses. I'm just using Velvet. So I shot for 3 nights toward the peak of the Neowise show that we had, and this was the first night that I shot, and it was with Velvet 56. And then the next night I came, met some really great friends this night up on the mountain, and this is with the Velvet 85, and you can see the Velvet 85 when you're, especially at the brighter apertures. This is, I think, f2.8. It has a bit of a sweet spot, and the corners go a little bit blurry, you know, with focus that's not great, and that underlying detail is mainly in the center. But the emotion and the mood to this image is something that really it sings for me. And again, I was like, nope, this is all I'm shooting stars with from now on. And then the third night, I went out and photographed with the Velvet 28, and getting this. With this particular lens, this is wide open at f2.2 essentially, because we have a plus sign, because we didn't think anyone would want anything that glowy. We wanted people to know this is over the top, but it wasn't over the top for me in this situation, to where the detail underneath that glow, even though you see those big halos around the bright stars, that the detail underneath the glow and even off in the corners is really sharp. So this really is my favorite Velvet, and these lenses are, for me, an example from my childhood of having an engineer for a father who had a woodworking shop. He would fix my toys with aluminum parts that he would do on the mill at work, and they were amazing. I remember being totally enthralled with this aluminum piece that he had fixed one of my things with, and like, I didn't even care about the thing that much, other than the fact that it worked now. But here's this beautiful aluminum hook that he put on there that fit my finger perfectly. It was way better than the plastic one that had been on it from the manufacturer, and it was exciting. And so for me, having appreciated that fine craftsmanship prepared me to say, okay, we can give people a product, and this has been our goal ever since, a product that you hold in your hand that says, hey, this is a work of art. And so that experience from my childhood really affected that. And you know, from there, we're pretty much just talking about exploration. Like Lens Baby, I love my job in that I get to play with the craziest stuff. Like, I went in looking for for what we're going to do here. And I don't know why we have this, but it seemed like a good idea at the time, I'm sure. And maybe I can cut strips of this and put it into Omni, or I don't know what. Maybe it'll be its own product. But it's pretty cool. I get to do that, and I don't know what you see, but I don't know. Tell me, do you want it? And then we've got. I feel like my job is one of the best jobs on the planet, to where I get to just say, okay, what do I do here? What's the, and Omni gives us a huge outlet for that. And I don't know what's next. This is doing that, and these are doing this, and I get to do that, and I don't know what that is, but yeah, like this is it. Like if I can step away and feed that daydreaming Craig from grade school or from before, like and if that can do the work that's needed to find the products that you're going to connect with, that's going to help you express your vision of the world, that's all I need, and that's what I want to do. And I am in such a great spot because I was able to kick this off as a creative working on a project for me. But then I got all of you to be part of this, because this is a collaboration. Me and my team at Lens Baby are exploring ideas, and then you're coming to us with feedback. You're coming to us with passions or with questions of how do I photograph something that I see that none of my other lenses can quite get right. And fortunately now Lens Baby we have Sweet Spot, we have Twist, we have Velvet, we have, what else do we have? We have Edge. And to be able to have these various effects, to be able to pick up, put on your camera, say, hey, this works for me, or no, this doesn't work over here, but it works over here. And we've done the purchasing of the 40 lenses that took us to get here, so that you don't have to. If we're to go back in terms of like that kid that turned his bike upside down, or most of his bike upside down, and rode it backwards while steering with his butt, that I ride a recumbent now. Like, I don't really care what people think, and I get a kick when I get comments about that, because I look like an idiot. I mean, not really, I'm not an idiot, but I look like an idiot, actually, out there on my recumbent, and because I commute in town. Like, it's a country, it's a touring thing. But for me, that harkens back to, hey, I want to learn something new. I want to be different in a way that serves me. Like that writing on my handlebars way back when I was in high school, that was our grade school. That was something for me that gave me great satisfaction. And I think there's a lot of things in my work that harken back to, hey, I get to experiment with new things. I get to learn to ride a bike in a different way. I get to be more comfortable on my recumbent, and I don't care what people think. You must not care what people think either, to some extent, because your images are going to be different. If you're shooting with Lens Baby, your images are not going to be the norm. And so if you can say, I'm looking for my particular vision of the world, and it may involve this crazy creative stuff, more power to you. We love you, and I love the fact that you're a part of this community, and looking at how to be more part of that. And I think that ultimately the community is where the meaning is, and it's not going to be perfect. I learned about a worldview, wabi-sabi, Japanese concept, and it's appreciating the beauty in impermanence, incompleteness, and imperfection. And Lens Baby is going to be imperfect. It's going to be incomplete. We're always going to be building. You saw how that first Lens Baby, because of your feedback, changed into the second and into the third and now into an entire lineup. But it's always going to be evolving, and what we have now is going to build on what's next. And I promise you, what's next isn't going to be the perfection and the sterility of what you can get from every other lens manufacturer. It's going to be something that has heart and soul and is going to be different and allow you to express your vision of the world in a way that you just can't otherwise. And I'm excited about that, and I'm excited about you being a part of this. This is going to be a great week. Thank you for listening to me this long. I know I go on and I get excited about things that not everybody's excited about, but I've lived this journey, and it started very young, and you have lived your journey, and you're part of this community too, and you're able to, and this community is able to influence where Lens Baby goes next. And I'm super excited about having you here and seeing where we go as a community. Thank you. Have a great conference.
Dreamy artistic images.
Emotive and soulful imagery.
That extra recognition and quirkiness.
Really unique images.
Se olvidaron completamente.
Extraordinary results. Creamy bokeh and a dreamy feel.
Creative and quirky landscapes.
Unique blur effect.
Fun flares.
morning, Shoot Extraordinary Conference. We are here with our speaker, Robert Pugh, who is going to take us through an amazing adventure with Omni. First, I'm going to give him an opportunity to introduce himself. Robert, my friend, how are you today?
I'm brilliant, feeling good and very excited for getting this first convention on the go.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're super happy that you're here with us. Tell us a little bit about your background, Robert, for those of us who don't know.
Okay, well, I mean, normally it would probably take me an hour to explain my background, so I'm going to try and cram it into as fast as I can. So briefly, I'm an international wedding and portrait photographer. So the international, because I do travel all over the globe. My normal stomping ground is sort of Dominic and Cuba for weddings, a lot in the UK. My career basically started in the army. So I was a sniper in the army, did 8 years, came out, and I studied photography before I went into the forces. So it was a natural progression to go back into photography when I came out. Fell in love with weddings. I was a celebrity photographer, so that's where it all began for me. So the likes of X Factor here in the UK, that's what I did for 3 years on the trots, covering that. And then transitioned over to weddings. It suited my style. I'm very flamboyant. I like to create things. And also that's where kind of Lens Baby came into it as well. Because of their match for me with like the Omni and their lenses, it really suited my style of creating in camera. I do like to edit, but I like to get as much as I can right in camera. So I'm just going to show you my website. So if you do want to know a little bit more about me, you can head over there, browse, view, and have a read at some of the blogs.
Yeah, that's awesome, Robert. And I love the adventure of stepping into the things that you love in so many different ways, and then using Lens Baby as a way to further capture those things that, you know, really help you set yourself apart as a photographer. So that's really beautiful. Can't wait to see your course. We're going to show us your website here real quick. If you guys are interested before the class or after, make sure that you go check out Robert's website. We'll put a link in the description and in the comments for you.
So head over to, this is my website, the homepage, loads of information there. Head to the blog. We've got loads happening in the blog for you to read through and find out a bit more about me and how I use the Lens Baby lenses as well. So I'm just going to throw this screen back to Michael. There you go, Michael.
Yeah, of course. Thanks, Robert. And one final question for you. Can you give us a quick overview about what we're about to see in your course?
Oh, well, you know, what are you not going to see? So I'm going to basically, I've got it here, the Omni set. I carry it around with me everywhere. It lives in my camera bag. And I'm going to show you how to create different effects using the base kit. So we'll first have a look at what comes in the base kit. We'll have a look at the extras as well that you can add on. But I want to show you what you can do when you get this delivered straight out of the box. So we'll run through some really simple effects, but effective creative effects as well.
Brilliant, Robert. We can't wait. Shoot Extraordinary Conference. It's time. Getting ready right now. Grab your popcorn, grab some coffee. Robert Pugh, my friends.
Hi and welcome to my studio. So before we get started with the live shoot that's going to happen just behind me, I just want to talk to you about the Omni Creative Filter Kit. So I've got one here with me and we'll have a closer look at this before we start. But there is one important thing you're going to have to do before you purchase one, and that is go to your most used lenses and find out what the filter thread size is on the lens. I say that because there's two options when ordering one of these. You can either order it with a step down ring kit in a 49 to a 58 millimeter, or the second option of a 62 to an 82 millimeter. Now, as a rule of thumb, I would probably say that if you're an Olympus, Fuji, Panasonic shooter, then you're probably going to be ordering the 49 to the 58 millimeter because their lenses are a lot smaller. If you're a Sony, a Nikon, a Canon shooter, then you're probably going to be going for the 62 to 82 millimeters to cover your step down rings, because your lenses are larger in that format. And that's really the only decision that you need to do. So moving on from that, the kit itself, awesome. I use it all the time. As a wedding and portrait photographer, I want to take my images to that next level, but I don't want to be spending hours in Photoshop editing away. I want my clients to see that effect there and then. So when I'm doing a wedding, I do that portrait shoot, I show them the back of the camera, and they're like, wow, they can see the effect, their eyes widen up, they're so excited, and that gets my creative skills sort of flowing and more excited as well. But if I've got to just show them the back of the camera and then try and explain to them the effect that I'm going to do when I'm editing, they'll probably give you a bit of a confused look and think, well, you know, why that looks okay. That's why I love the Omni set, because it allows me to see that effect instantly in camera. It allows me, my creative skills, to just flow out and basically create anything I want. Okay, so the kit itself comes in this lovely pouch, which I really like. There is these strips on the back. They're more for when you buy the expansion kit. So the expansion kits can stick onto the back, so it keeps everything neat and tidy and all together. As you open it up, you've got two extension bars there, and then you've got the crystals or the wands that live in this little pocket, and then at the back you've got the disc. So the disc is what I would say is the Omni, and it helps create all the effects, because without this it just wouldn't work. We've got two magnets here. The magnets rotate around, and then on the back you've got the thread. So the actual disc itself is 77 millimeters, and if your lens is a 77 millimeter, this will just go straight onto your lens. You don't need any step down rings. But for me, my lens is 67 millimeters on the filter thread, so I have a step down ring to bring it down to that, from 77 to 67. And now it goes straight onto my lenses, so happy days there. Like I say, two magnets, and if we get an extension bar, I'll just pull one out. It just goes straight on there with magnets, and now it's like a knuckle, you know, we can move it all around, and we're not limited to any direction we go. It can go anywhere you want. So say we get a wand out, so this is the kind of rainbow effect, or the light leaks, I like to call it. And you can put this on, and now you can see the flexibility. We can actually maneuver this everywhere, and we can even move it around like so. Okay, you don't need to just stick with one. Now when I'm doing a wedding, I would probably say I've more got this on when I'm creating some portraits. The other favorite one that I like to use is the seahorse. So this crystal, and this crystal goes on there, and again I can just bring this in to create the effect that I want. I love this kind of crystally bokeh, the effect that you get with this. Now we are going to be demoing these two just in a moment, so you can see them happening. I am going to stick to just using the starter pack, the creative kit, so you can see exactly what this can do. And obviously you can expand on this as well. So there is, I've got two packs here, so let's just have a look. So this is the crystal expansion pack, and the crystal expansion pack comes with like the prism. We all used to carry a prism round, put it in front of the lens and hold it there as we maneuver it around. So I do love this as well, really handy to use. I won't go through everything that's in the pack itself, so I'll just throw up on the screen there what is included in the crystal expansion pack, so you can see that. And then I've also got the flare expansion pack. So they all do come in these bags as well, and you can see that we can just velcro these together, and there you go, a nice easy carry around, and it's got all your stuff in one place. And in the flare, the difference with the flare is you can see how it flares out the crystals. The way I like to use this one, so I'll just demo on here. Let's just pull this one off, and we'll pop this one on. So I like to use this where it's being pushed outwards from the lens like that, and you get this nice flare sort of coming through your image. So really handy and nice to use. And again, I'll pop up on the screen what crystals are included in the flare pack. So those are just two small examples of expansion packs. Obviously there's quite a few of them. I'll throw up again on the screen what expansion packs they are so you can see them. Another one of mine is the colour expansion pack, so very nice to use to add those different colours in. Brilliant for the summer where you want to add that boost of colour and that flare into your images as well. So without any further ado, let's head behind me over to the studio part and let's create some images. So I just want to do a sort of a recap of how we're going to shoot, okay? I could use flash, but I decided I'm going to use the ambient light around me because most people who's buying this kit, maybe they don't have flashes or fancy lights. So I'm going to just be using this ambient light that's all around. I will be putting one big light on over there. It's a constant light, and that is purely so you can see me working and the model working, because with video we have to light it to a certain degree so you can see what's going on. I am being lit with light here. The camera I'm going to use, so I'm a Sony shooter, so this would be my normal shooting camera. This is the Sony A9, and again it all fits on the front, no problem. But I want to show you how versatile the kit is and that it can work on any camera no matter what. So I'm actually going to be using what I class as my personal camera, what I take on holiday with me. So that is the Fuji X100V. Okay, you're probably thinking, wow, that's a bit Frankenstein. What is on that? Well, generically it's a 35mm, but I like to shoot in a 50mm, so I have the 50mm lens adapter on there to turn it into a 50mm. And then you can see that I can actually put the Omni on front of the adapter. So it just goes to show you, even if you've got a fixed focal length camera, you can still use the Omni on there, okay? And you can see it's all set up with the crystals on there and it's all ready to go. Now, I'm not going to edit any of these pictures. I'm going to take the image, and you can see the image comes straight up on the screen for you to see. So it's really important to know that I'm shooting in JPEG. I've put all my settings in to the camera, and then I've attached all the wands and the effects that I want in the image. And I'm going to take the image like that. We could edit it, we could stick it up there and mess around with it. But anyone that follows me, you know that I like to limit the amount of editing that I do. So my style of shooting is to shoot in a film-like style. So all my my colours is towards hectare. So that's kind of the colour palette that I like. And that's why I like using this, because it allows me to create those light leak effects that we used to get in film many moons ago. So let's head over to the studio, let's start getting creative and let's see what we can do. Hello everyone, and welcome to the studio side of things. We've got my lovely wife here, so she's going to be our model for today. I just want to quickly talk about lighting. It is very well lit in here at the moment. That is purely because I've had to put a light here and 2 lights over there just to light us because of the filming purposes. So I want you to see me and what I'm doing. Treat this as we're only using the ambient light to take a picture of Lisa. And the reason I wanted to do that, we could have used flash, but I think using flash is the next step of creativity, and that's a whole nother video. So keeping it real, I think using ambient light, because the majority of you will be using this in your own home, using the ambient light in your own home. When you go outside, using that beautiful sun and getting really creative as well. Once you've mastered using ambient light, then it's time to move on to flash. I think throwing all that in the mix is a bit too much just to get you started. So let's keep our creative minds focused. We'll get creative with the Omni and this light that's around us at the moment. Well, I think let's get the camera, talk about the camera, and then we'll do our first picture so you can see it come up on the screen, and then we'll do a little breakdown and see what we've done with it. Okay, so for this I'm using the Fuji X100V, as I mentioned before. This camera is kind of what I say, it's my personal camera. It comes on holiday with me. It's small, it's compact. So it's a 35mm camera. That's the fixed lens, because it's a fixed lens. But you can buy adapters to it. I like to shoot 50mm, and I've actually got the adapter on to turn it into a 50mm lens. Great for portraits. The Omni, we've set it up with our step down ring. So it's actually got a 67mm step down ring. And again, when I mentioned before, the majority of my lenses are actually 67mm, which is brilliant because it means I just use one step down ring that goes across the board on all my lenses and adapters as well. So we've put the ring on, or the disc if you like to call it that, and we've set it up with some very unique crystals. Now I've got the horseshoe on here, and I've actually got the prism on here as well. They both work really well together, and they give this really sort of, if I was to call it like a crystal bokeh-licious, okay, so that's going to be the word today, crystal bokeh-licious. And it's beautiful for framing someone if you're going to do a portrait session. I know we're doing it indoors and it isn't the most flattering background, it's just grey. The light source in here, I actually know what the colour temperature is in here. So the colour temperature in here is 5800 Kelvin. When you're outside, when you're setting up your camera, especially using things like this, I do think it's good to work in manual and to start understanding your Kelvin temperature. So that's your white balance, okay? Instead of using auto white balance, lock in your Kelvin. Outside, sunny day, 5800 Kelvin, beautiful, you get some lovely pictures, and it gives really nice skin tones as well. That's what I would generally do for my wedding portraits. I would work in manual, I would put the Kelvin in, create the effect in camera, so when I show the bride and groom, they're just, you know, their eyes open up, they get so excited on the images and they want to show all their family and friends. So let's do the first shot. We'll get it up on the screen and you can see. Camera settings for this, everyone's going to ask me. So I'm at ISO 2000, I'm at 200th of a second and I'm shooting at f2. When I'm doing portraits and I'm using the crystals, I find it's better to shoot at low apertures, and that way the crystals sort of blur into the image, but the subject is perfectly sharp. If you're shooting at f8, f16, then you tend to see the sort of the outline of the crystals come in. So that is one thing to know there. It's definitely better working at lower apertures when you are using this type of accessories. Okay, so obviously that would be different if you're doing macro and you're using them because of the 1-to-1 ratio, but for portraits I definitely say shoot at low apertures so the effect blends into the image. So let's get that first shot done and let's see what we get. Turn the camera on. I'm just going to come into there. Beautiful, nice. And we'll get that. Okay, cool. So let's have a look at that. There we go. So we can see that's up on the screen now. I'm looking at here at the back of the camera. Obviously it's exactly the same as what you're seeing. We've got that really nice effect on the left hand side, the top left hand side. This is the shoe horse crystal, and it's creating this like dapple like bokeh that's coming into the image. And then on the right hand side of the image you can see how I've basically got the crystal almost vertical there, and that's bringing in this sort of double reflection of Lisa, how it comes across, and we can play around with that. We can sort of move it around a bit. Colours really nice, again straight out of camera. I've just set up this camera how I like to shoot and my colour palette. And I would probably say, looking at this, there's actually nothing to edit. So we could just use that image, we could tweet it off, and it could be brilliant, amazing, everyone love it, get loads of likes and follows, hopefully. So let's just have a little play around with this. Now, of course, we've got live view going on, so you know I could just look at the back here. Now, what I like to do is just do a little twist to it and take the picture. So that'll come up on the screen and we can have a look. And it's just that little twist that I like to do. Now remember, we can, depending on your colour palette that you like, depends on, perfect, just there like that. That's a nice one, cool. So it depends on your colour palette, it depends on how you shoot. If you're like me, film's got this totally different look. Now with film, you always overexpose, so no matter the film speed you got, when you put it in your camera, you always overexposed. Now I take that onto the digital cameras, so because I do shoot in JPEG, I like to try and get everything 99% right in camera. And one of the things that I found with digital cameras is even when you get the exposure correct, you know, it's in that center on the 0, digital cameras tend to underexpose the image ever so slightly. It's like this safeguard they've put in where if it overexposes, it ruins the image. So they put this little safeguard in where it always underexposes ever so slightly. And that's what I found. So I always like to overexpose just a touch to get that image I want. So, and again, the last image that come up, and I'm going to show you on the back of the camera so you can see that. There we go. Well, if it focuses, which it's probably not going to because it's focused on Lisa. So the camera that I'm filming on, it's got eye detection, and it's actually focusing on Lisa's eye, so it's staying focused on her no matter what. But it's up on the screen so you can see it there. That's straight out of camera. Now a beautiful picture, we've got some lovely bokeh coming on. Imagine that outside when you've got the browns and greens and the yellows coming in from the flowers and the trees. So imagine all that coming into it, because don't forget these are crystals. So because they're translucent, because you can see through them, it will bring the colour in whatever is in its surrounding. Okay, so great thing to have a look at. And of course, the image will change where the camera's positioned. So for instance, now if it's up like vertical, the light's coming in and hitting the crystals at different angles. So I can move this crystal ever so slightly across to there maybe, or I can bring it in closer, say to there. And you can see how I've just moved the prism across. We'll just have a little look, and now that's just broadened across and we're getting that reflection coming in. And we'll just move this again so we can get a different effect from it again. Best thing with mirrorless cameras, we get this live view. So every bit of movement we do, we get to see instantly. And again, I'm just going to bring it in there and take that picture. So we see that come up again, really nice. You can see how I've moved it basically vertical now, the prism. But I'm shooting the camera in its portrait orientation, you know, it's vertical orientation. So if we went to landscape orientation, yeah, and we took a picture, the crystals and the horseshoe are in totally different places. So it's going to do another effect. I mean, I could just maneuver them all around and change the effect, but let's see what it does. Hey, you know, it costs nothing, it's digital, it's free to do. Let's get creative, okay? So again, I'm just going to do a little tap on there, have a look. I'm just going to dial that down ever so there, perfect. You'll see that coming in. And I'm going to do that as well. Perfect. Okay, so did you see that? That's come up on screen. Again, a total different look. The streaks coming down. A little bit too bright, so let's just change that ever so slightly. We can do that on here. We're going to change it. There, perfect, nice. Perfect, get that coming in, really dreamy look coming on. See them coming up. Nice. And there. See how when I move, I'm just going to come down and you can see the reflection change above Lisa's head. So there. So a couple of images come up there. Okay, totally different look, how it's all streaking in. We can improve on that slightly, and again, it's all to do with, so this shot, just drop it down a little bit, perfect. Nice, moving into the corner there. And let's have a look at that. So that's up on the screen there. And all we've done is we've moved her into the corner to bring that in. So you can see a little black mark up on the corner, and that is this here. So let's move that out of the way. Let's get rid of that. We'll move this across a bit. We'll move it down slightly. So manoeuvring the crystal to where I want it. I'm going to put Lisa in the corner there. I'm going to perfect, nice. I'm going to move back slightly and get it there, nice. Okay, cool, yeah, I like it. So some really wicked effects like shining in there. Again, we can change this up even more. So this, let's bring it across and have it vertical. Now we need to look in, and we'll bring that in, and I'm just going to add it in ever so slightly, just to there. Now just bring Lisa's there. Okay. Okay, perfect. So we've moved it over to the other side. So you can see how creative you can get with this. So that's with obviously the crystal. I do like the crystal, one of my favourite ones. Now this is a smaller crystal. This is a great way of experimenting. Your favourite ones, have them lined up and just see which effect that you prefer. I'm going to put this on and I'll show you the difference from this as well. The wands are great for really blending in and pushing. Let's see if we can push that over to there. Nice. Get this lightly coming all the way across. And bring it, Lisa, down, nice and sharp. Brilliant. You see these coming up? Nice. And you see how the wand is pushing it across the top. It's coming along the top there. We've got this massive sort of streak of light coming across. Now, if that was outside, again, the translution, so you would have whatever's outside all coming across. There's a great way of creating a puddle with one of these, so I will show you that on the last stage we do. But let's see if we can change it to one more. So we'll take this off. And this is the wavy line. Okay, love this one. Now, this is probably one of my favourite things about this system. The magnets, how fast it is to change. Could you imagine in, your editing software and you're trying to figure out, the look or the feel that you want to do, is where if you're physically there and you have a pocket full of these adapters, just by pulling it out, popping it on, and you can maneuver it around and get that amazing effect that you couldn't actually create on a computer, because the effect, not only is it dependent on which crystal you use or wand you use, but it's also dependent on the environment that's around you and the colours that are around you as well. So let's have a go with this one. Let's see what we can do. So as I was saying before, because of new cameras being, the digital era and what you see is what you get, we have this brilliant function where as soon as we look through, we get the effect. So I've just tapped the button there, so we'll throw that image up so you can see. Even if Lisa was blinking or her eyes closed, we'll throw it up. But as soon as I'm looking through, without even taking a picture, I can see the effect coming in. And we can maneuver this one. I want this coming over the head to match kind of that shoe horse coming in and bringing the effect in there. And, it's just perfect there. Nice, take that. And this is what I love about this, by bringing it in, we'll move it out and across. We'll get that there. Perfect. Cool. It's like Christmas, all that glitter and, oh, that's it. Yeah, we'll get that. Perfect, nice. All that sort of bokeh coming in, all that glittery, glittery coming in. I can see I've just pushed this black part again into the corner there. So let's maneuver that out now. Let's fix the problem. There we go, there. Cool, perfect, nice. And we'll do another one, nice, like that, cool. Now, what we can do, one like that as well. So you can see the last two images, how we could change it from portrait to landscape instantly, but it gave a totally different look, and how the different ones and the different crystals gives an absolute complete different look. So one last one. So this is what I call the rainbow effect. So let's just pop this on and let's see what we can get from this. So I like this one for its kind of rainbow. There we go. Perfect. Bring that in. Let's see if we can get, oh, look at that, that's magical there. We'll have that. And look at the rainbow colours really coming in there. That's film. To me, that's a light leaks from a camera that's coming in. That really is. That really simulates when the light leaks are happening from those old cameras and using film, and you're getting them all come in. You just can't create that with digital cameras nowadays. You have to create it normally in Photoshop to get that look. So to be able to just carry this, pop it on, and if you are that kind of vintage shooter, if you love film and you edit towards film, and you think, you know what, this image, it would really suit that kind of light leak rainbow coming into it, then wow, you know, pop it on, take the picture, your basically job's done. You've saved yourself so much time in editing. So I hope this has been really informative for you. I hope you've got a better understanding now on how the Omni system works, how you can benefit from it, and just how your creative skills can just grow just by using this Omni system when you're out and about.
Dreamy artistic images.
Emotive and soulful imagery.
That extra dimension and quirkiness.
Really unique images.
Se olvidaron completamente.
Extraordinary results. Creamy bokeh and a dreamy feel.
Creative and quirky landscapes.
Unique blur effect.
Fun flares.
Poetic, oniric look.
Something extraordinary.